Afternoon, everyone. It's Jim here at Quantitative. Welcome to our next live revision blast for Edexcel A-Level Business, and hopefully everyone is recovered. Somebody's turned the lights out in the office here, so I've all gone all dark here. I think it's because the office team leave at 5 o'clock, and hopefully you've recovered from paper one, ready for some calculation practice, Graham. Whilst I go switch the lights on, do you want to tell us what we're going to do?
Indeed, Jim. Hello, everyone. So, yes, we're going to do some calculations that are focused around Paper 2 and the Paper 2 Advanced Information. So, you will need a calculating implement. And we'll ask you to pop your answers into the chat window. And, of course, as always, we will embellish as we go along and try and answer any questions you've got. So please use the chat window to ask any questions and also to type in your answers.
I've seen the light, Graham. I'm back, mate. It's amazing, isn't it?
Good stuff.
I know.
I did get a shock there.
So as we go, yeah, we've got the live chat working, and I'm on the PowerPoint clicking through. Well, I won't show the answers until you're happy that people have had a good go.
Yeah, so, I'll say next slide, please, Jim.
Something like that. Superb stuff. Right. All the best, everyone.
So let's just quickly go through the possible calcs that you may get on Paper 2. These are highlighted on Advanced Information. So break even, 2.2.3 break even is on Advanced Information. So you may be asked to calculate break even. You may be asked to calculate the margin of safety. Not necessarily a calculation, but you may be asked to perform a calculation based on interpreting a break-even chart. So make sure you can do that. Variance analysis, again, you may be required to perform a calculation on variance analysis, adverse, favorable, that sort of thing. So Jack McGuire's put break-even equals fixed cost divided by variable costs minus other way around, selling price per unit minus variable cost per unit. So other possible calculations are calculating gross profit, operating profit and profit for the year, as well as those relevant margins. So gross profit margin, operating profit margin, and profit for the year, net profit margin, and the two liquidity ratios, the current ratio and the acid test ratio. Okay, moving on. You also may be asked to calculate capacity utilization. Quantitative sales forecasting is on the advanced information. So you may be asked to calculate moving averages. That has been examined before. A 4-quarter moving average. Today we're going to look at a 3-period, a 3-year moving average. You also may be asked to interpret scatter graphs and line of best fit. You may also need to calculate seasonal variations as well as part of quantitative sales forecasting. And finally, gearing ratio and return on capital ratio. Now, before we look at some calcs, now remember, obviously paper 1's been and gone. Paper 2, there are 4-mark questions on paper 2. There could be some 4-mark calculation questions, 4-mark explain questions. So, but you may also be asked to perform a calculation as part of a 10, 12, or 20-mark question, especially something around moving averages. So a few years ago on paper 3, there was a question where students had to calculate 4 elements for data sets from moving average information and then use that in a 20-mark recommendation question. So not only do you need to be able to calculate these areas, you need to be able to interpret them and perhaps use them in your application analysis and evaluation. No, so Ravi's there in the chat window. No 8 markers, no. Paper 3, 8 markers only. So on paper 2, there'll be 2 sections, and each section will have 2 4-mark questions, a 10 mark, a 12, and a 20. So there's no 4-mark questions on paper 3. They are replaced by the 8-mark questions. And we're going to do something on paper 3 this week. So let's have a look at. Now, I did say break even and margin of safety is a possible calculation. So I thought we'd do both together. So in order to calculate the monthly margin of safety, you need to be able to work out the break even here. So on screen, you should see a table showing some selected financial data for a business for last year. Last year, the actual output was 5,400 units. Can you calculate the monthly margin of safety, please? Now, while you're having a go at that, I will just cover some other things while you are busy typing the numbers into your calculator or smartphone. Remember, break even. If break even comes out of as a decimal, then you must round up because you can't break even at a decimal. So, and this came up in this came up in about 2017, I think, on an exam paper where students had to calculate the margin of safety. The break even was a decimal. Students didn't round up and subsequently got the wrong answer. Now, it seems we are split between 600 units and 50 units. Now, one of those is correct, one is incorrect, but I know why you got it. This is why it is so important not only to read the question, but to always show you're working out, because the question said the monthly margin of safety, not the yearly. So if you put 600, that is the yearly margin of safety. And if you only wrote 600, you'd get nothing, you get no marks. But if you showed you're working out and then put 600, the examiner could see that you've done some steps in the calculation correctly. You're going to grab some marks. The answer is indeed, Jim. Can we have the next slide? It's 50. So here's how I worked it out. You could have just worked out the yearly break even or the yearly margin of safety and divided by 12. But we've gone through all the steps here. So you've got the monthly fixed cost of 16,000. Remember, contribution per unit is selling price minus variable cost per unit. That gives us a monthly break even of 400 units. The monthly output is 450 units. We were told last year actual output was 5,400. So we divide that by 12. And we've got the actual output minus break even is our margin of safety. So that was a really interesting one to do because obviously we got 2 completely different answers. 50 is the correct answer. If you got 600, there was some element of understanding there, but you just didn't go the final stage and read the question fully. That's why it's so important to always show your workings out. Next slide, please, Jim. Now, this is my favorite activity that has the word variance in it. So on screen, you've got, again, it's a table, would you believe, showing some selected financial data for a business. Based on that information you can see on screen, can you calculate the total profit variance for last year, stating whether it is adverse? That should say favorable rather than or variance. So that should say adverse or favorable. So can you state whether the variance is adverse or favorable? I put that in on purpose as part of our numeracy strategy. See if anyone picked up on that. So can you decide whether, well, firstly, work out the profit variance and then decide whether it's adverse or favorable. Now, we are really, Jim, I think we might have to call 999 here because these students are on fire. They're doing these really, really quickly. So, that is, if you've got a favorable variance of, and just to pick up, I know we're typing into the chat window and obviously this is not a real exam situation. No, be really, really specific. Make sure you got your pound signs in front, and state whether it is adverse or favorable. The answer is indeed £15,000 favorable. So you can work out the actual profit, which was the actual sales revenue minus the actual total costs. So the actual profit was 90,000. The budgeted profit was 75,000. And because the actual profit was higher than budget, so better off, we're better than expected, it is a favorable variance. Okay, let's have a look at another one. Let's do something on the current ratio. So on screen, you can see some selected financial data for a business last year. All we'd like you to do is calculate the current ratio of the business for last year based on the information that you can see on screen. So what do we think? So a lot of steps to this. Firstly, you've got to work out the total current assets. So you need to ascertain which on screen or in that table are current assets. Then you've got to decide which ones are current liabilities. So you've got to calculate the current liabilities. Then you need to calculate the current ratio. What do we think? It's great to see so many answers flying in to the chat window. Give you a few more minutes there to have a think. So I think where if you are going to go wrong on this, it would be mixing up receivables and payables. So remember, receivables is current asset, payables is a current liability because you're paying money out, where receivables you are receiving money in. And it looks as though the majority, there's a little bit of a dispute in the chat window, but that's fine because we're going to go through it anyway. But the answer is indeed 1.5 to 1. So we had all our current assets up, which was our inventory, cash and receivables. That's our total current assets. Then we work out our current liabilities, which is our overdraft and our payables. And then we divide the current assets by the current liabilities. Sometimes I've seen students then multiply that by 100. You don't. Why would you do that? Because you wouldn't be corrected to it. So anyway, the answer is 1.5 to 1. Now, just in the chat window, can someone tell me, is that current ratio there, 1.5 to 1, is that any good? Is that a good current ratio? What do we think? 1.5 to 1. Well, it tells me, for a start, that for every £1 of current liabilities, the business has £1.50 of current assets. So just looking at that, is that a good current ratio? What do we think? What do we think? So lots of people saying yes. Yeah, maybe I should have asked for a little bit more of explanation. It'll do. Well, I suppose it will. We'll have to, wouldn't it? And we've got a bit of evaluation there. Depends. Now, depends on is absolutely right. We do not know if that is a good current ratio or not, because we don't know what business it is or what market it operates in. It could be too high. It could be too low. There is no such thing really as an ideal. And we touched on this in our cinema workshops. I think when we do our cinema workshops, which was about 4 weeks ago, I'd looked at Tesco's current ratio at the time, and it was 0.4 to 1. I think. 0.4 to 1. So based on the textbooks, you say, well, that is far lower than this mystical ideal. And I think Keisha there said, compared to the industry average, Tesco are a cash-generating business, so they can operate at much lower levels of liquidity. So 0.4 to 1 for some businesses would be a catastrophe. It's not an issue for Tesco. So it depends, and compared to the industry average is really, really crucial. So at this stage, we're not really in a position because we haven't got the context of the business. Well done, everyone. Let's do one more. So we're on to the gross profit margin. So the table below shows, again, some selected financial data for a business last year. Based on that, can you calculate the gross profit margin for the business last year, based on what we can see there? So remember, there are 3 profitability ratios you need to be able to calculate: gross profit margin, operating profit margin, profit for the year, brackets, net profit margin. But you may have to actually just calculate gross profit, operating profit, or profit for the year on its own anyway. So how did we get the ratio for the last answer? Was that the that was a current ratio, wasn't it? Well, I'll tell you what we'll do, Jim boy.
Graham boy.
Hey.
We can go back to that after this one, can't we? If you want,
cheers, Jim boy. Yeah, so that's what we'll do.
Okay.
We will go back to the current ratio, Mr. Boy, and we'll have a look at that one. So I lost my train of thought there. I'm back on track now. So lots of answers coming into the chat window. 60%. So if it is 60%, and I don't know if it's 60%. It could be. If it is, that would mean that for every £1 of sales revenue, the business is generating 60p of profit. And again, we're not in a position to say whether that's good or bad because we do not know the industry, the market this business is operating in. So this is slightly trickier, this one, because you weren't given. So we know the formula for gross profit margin is sales revenue. No, it's not. It's gross profit divided by sales revenue times 100. We weren't given the sales revenue, but you could manipulate the formula to work it out. We're given cost of sales and we're given gross profit. We know that sales revenue minus cost of sales is gross profit. So therefore, cost of sales plus gross profit must be sales revenue, which leads me to believe that the answer is 60%. So the sales revenue was 800,000. That is the 320,000 plus the 480,000. Then we just divide the 480,000 by the 800,000 again and multiply that by 100, and that gives us. So in terms of that never came out of 2 decimal places. I mean that was exactly 60%. But a question in an exit, you may be asked, and Edexcel are very specific about this. You may get a question that says write your answer to 2 decimal places, and if it tells you to write your answer to 2 decimal places, then that's what the question's asking you to do. You need to write your answer to 2 decimal places, because if you don't, you run the risk of losing a mark because you're not fully answering the question. Jim boy, can we just go back to that current ratio? So the formula, Jim boy, for the current ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. Now here you weren't given total current assets, you had to add them up. So the inventory, the cash and the receivables, that's our current assets. All those added together is 225,000. The current liabilities, that's our overdraft and our payables, that's 150,000. So the 225,000 divided by the 150,000 gives us a current ratio of 1.5 to 1, which tells us that for every £1 of current liabilities, the business has £1.50 of current assets. We're flying through these. We've only got one activity left, so I think we'll have to add a little bit of stuff on at the end. So moving averages. Now, I wanted to spend a little bit of time on moving averages because it's been examined previously, it's a difficult concept. So the theory behind moving averages is, if we have a look at the table on screen, and we want you to calculate the values of A, B, C, and D. So could it be a 4-mark question? Well, of course it could be, because you might be asked to calculate A, B, C, and D, which would be your 4 marks. Just a line there is mentioning about, do we have to write the current ratios as I would be writing as 1.5 to 1, because that's the true understanding of it. So if we look at moving averages as a concept, because you may be given a question that is just about the theoretical side of moving averages, not necessarily the calculation. So if we have a look at the sales here between 2016 and 2021, we can see that they are a bit erratic. So in 2016 there were 400,000, then in 2017 they went down to 350,000. Then in 2018 they went up to 420,000, then they dipped to 415,000, then they went down again to 365,000, and then they went up to 450,000. Now, moving averages and quantitative and sales forecasting go hand in hand, really. So the idea behind moving averages is we smooth out the fluctuations in the sales data. So moving averages is a concept where we smooth out the fluctuations in sales data, therefore allowing us to find out the underlying trend, and then we can extrapolate that trend forward using a line of best fit, and that allows us to predict future sales with some degree of accuracy, I suppose, because it uses past data. Although past data is no guarantee of future performance, but that's the idea behind moving averages. So anyway, and see, amazingly, some answers coming in. So for those who haven't had a go at this yet, can we have a go at calculating A, B, C, and D? No, there's a good question there about, would moving averages most likely be 12 markers? Well, you could be given a 10-mark question on assessing maybe assess the value of moving averages to a business or something like that. If they were part of if you had to perform a calculation and then use the results of those in your answer, it's probably more likely to be a 12 marker or definitely a 20 marker. For example, later on in this week, we're going to be looking at investment appraisal for paper 3. So, and there was a question a couple of years ago where students had to calculate 2 methods of investment appraisal and use that as part of an evaluative question, an assess question, and those calcs were worth 6 marks. So, you could be, probably more likely to be a 12 marker and a 20 marker if this comes up. Remember, it's just the concept of quantitative, rather than actual moving averages. It may not come up. It's into that umbrella, if that makes sense. So should we have a look at these? So first of all, let's have a look at A. So before we have a look at B, so what we've done there is, if you could work it out, so we added up the sales from 2016 to 2018. That gives us the 1,170,000. Then we add up the 2017 to 2019. That gives us the 1,185,000. Then, so that 1,200,000 is derived from 2018's figures, 2018 to 2020 added together gives us the 1,200,000. And then the 2019 to 2021 sales will be what B is, Jim, if you can reveal that, please. 1,230,000. So, and then what we do is we want to find the average because it's a moving average. So we simply divide it by 3. So C is correct. Everyone's got that 400,000. And D is 410,000. So if you have a look at that, and there's some questions about 3 or 4 year, 4 quarter moving averages, 3 period or 4 quarter. So that's what you're more likely to be asked. So if we have a look now, if we look at the sales in the second column, we could see how erratic they are. They're up and down. But by using moving averages, we've smoothed out those fluctuations and we found the trend, and the trend is definitely increasing. So you could plot those on a graph and do a line of best fit and extrapolate those forward. So that was moving averages. So there was a few questions I think I've picked up. It's just trying to provide an answer which catches the most what's been asked in the chat window. The specification is very clear: 3-period or 4-quarter. This is 3-period because it's 3 years. You may get a 4-quarter. 4-quarter was examined, I believe, in 2018. I think it was 2018 paper 3. I think so. It's definitely been on a paper 3 question. There was lots of students asking about question 1, Jim. Can we go back to Ravi's just saying, how likely is it having to plot these results on a graph? If it's on the specification, then it can be examined. But it's actually, Jim, can we just go back a slide previous to that, please? So it's still really the next slide. So this is what is in quantitative sales forecasting: moving averages, 3-period, 4-quarter, interpretation of scatter graphs in line of best fit. So that is that's what we have looked at generally today. Now, while you have a quick look at that, I'm just going to double check one thing while Ron, because there's been a really good question there about quantitative sales forecasting. Quantitative decision making takes quantitative sales forecasting. Good stuff. So can we just go on to that next question, please, Jim? So there was a couple of questions about, going back on the margin of safety. So the margin of safety is the difference between actual output and break-even output. Okay? So the difference between actual output and break-even output. So the first thing we need to do is work out break-even. So break-even is fixed costs divided by variable cost per unit. Okay? So now this wanted the monthly margin of safety. So the first thing is we needed to work out the monthly break-even. So the first thing we would do is I would divide the fixed cost by 12 to get the monthly fixed costs. So we've got our fixed costs figure. Contribution per unit is selling price minus variable cost per unit. That's the £40. So Jim, if we go on to the next slide, so we can see that the monthly break-even last year is 400 units. That's a 16,000 divided by the 40. And then we've got the actual output, which was 450 units. And then, we've got our actual output, and then we've got our break-even output. And that gives us our monthly margin of safety by 50. So there was been a question there about, are we going to do every other quantitative concept in the live streams? We probably won't have time to do every single possible calculation. But if you go on our YouTube channel, Jim, I'm sure you'll agree that there are we've got loads of videos on paper 2 advanced information and all the different calcs. You can literally
we've done lots of live streams recently, haven't we? Which are all available on YouTube and on tutorT.net/live. If you go to Edexcel, go A-Level, and then go to the Edexcel revision blasts. I think we've done 5, haven't we? And in all of those, we covered things like capacity utilization several times, gearing ratio several times, as well as what we've covered today. I think we've done moving averages a couple of times. So lots of example questions if you want to go back over those on the archive. But there's only so many sessions we can do. But hopefully we'll get a chance before paper 2 to come back and revisit these with a bit of a warm-up, Graham. I guess that's the key, isn't it? Just some warm-up calculations before paper 2.
Yeah, so look out. So we're going to do some stuff on paper 3 shortly, but I think the level of engagement's been superb.
Yeah, fantastic. Somebody's asking, does the Grade Booster course contain information about paper 3, the pre-release? I think it's packed with it, isn't it? It's
there's
do you want to just briefly explain what's in there for the pre-release in there, Graham?
Well, we've just added some more that we went through in the cinema workshops, in terms of, there's about 4 or 5 videos with different questions relating to what possibly could come up. So again, looking at the international sports events industry, as well as the, UK sports retailers. There's a little bit of research in there. Yeah. So there's lots of exam questions, which are based on some context. So
Hamza's asking, haven't done any research. You don't need to do any research, do you, Graham? That's the whole point about the pre-release. You don't need to actually have done any research. It's just familiarity, because all the information you need is given to you in the exam paper. So it's more about practicing given context and examples.
Yeah,
isn't it,
I think it'd be worthwhile being familiar with some of the key themes, such as Sports Direct being being a market leader and things like that. But Thoughts on the error on the advanced marketing mix? I've not seen paper one, so I can't comment on the paper that's been sat. I'm afraid, so I've not seen it.
Yeah, I mean, there are one or two queries, clarifications across different subjects, exam boards, but by and large, I'd say it's 99%, aligned with what was in the AI. I mean, there's a few bits and bobs, aren't there? So I think our next one, we've got a couple of sessions to catch up on. We're looking at 20 markers, aren't we? And looking at some other stuff. So the best thing to do, as always, is just to make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Then you'll get you literally get an alert when the new schedule is added. So awesome. I think we're done, G. So I'll catch you on the next one, G. Look out for the later sessions this week. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to refresh, get energized again, and maybe just, as we can see from tonight's session, loads of people getting back into revision ahead of the exams next week. So many thanks to everyone who's joined us. As always, this session is available on download, and I'll make sure later tonight I upload the PowerPoint as well onto the TutorD site, so you can download that and use that if you wish. Cheers, G, as always. I shall see you soon, mate.
Cheers now. Speak to you soon, everyone.
Cheers, everyone.